Thank you. All right. So in a few minutes, we'll be starting. I believe we have about 23 people here. And please share with your friends. Let's get to 40, 50, and even more. About 3 weeks ago, we were over 100, and we're looking for another Zoom to, for another extension. But we're just 23 here, and we have a lot of friends that can benefit from this. Please, even though this is going to be recorded and posted on YouTube, but let's share with our friends. And I believe they are going to be learning a lot from here. So the topic again is research, sources of research data, part 2. All right, let's start. Over to you, Dr. Maha. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Once again, my name is Maha. Some of you might have seen me before in 1 or 2 sessions that we did. It's always a pleasure coming back here. And thank you for the inspirational video. I think that really pumps up the morale and always gives us some food for thought. Some very inspiring words there. I'll start by sharing my screen. Give me 1 second. Okay, do you guys see my screen? Okay, do you guys see that?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about the sources of research data. And this is a very important subject. And the reason why we keep coming back to this is because it's just so important in the research that we do. I'm sure everyone here has, by now, I'm sure you guys have some bit of experience with research, and Dr. Edwards is guiding you, and you have other mentors as well. So it's very important to know the basics of data and why we focus so much on data. Here, I put the slide together to basically give you an overview of what's the difference between literature search, literature review, and then systematic review, because these are different terms. Literature search is very simple. Like, okay, let's just go with the bullets so that I don't confuse anyone. But literature review is basically conducted for identifying gaps in the literature, synthesizing the conclusion, and helping clinicians and researchers inform decision-making and practice guidelines in their clinical practice. They do not undertake a systematic literature search. That is, you do not specify the steps that you will be taking, or you do not go in with the notion that, okay, this is what I have in mind, and this is what I'm looking for. No, you just do a general search on a subject to see what's missing, what's going on, what research has been done, what's like, just to get an overview of the subject. Systematic reviews, on the other hand, they use explicit and replicable methods. It's important to highlight the word replicable here. In order to retrieve all the available information, you go in with a set protocol. You've done your scoping review, you know what background search has been done. Now you're going in with a set steps. You have a set of steps in front of you, and then you're following those to do the research. So basically, you have predefined criteria that you're using. They included what studies you'll include, what studies you'll exclude, what studies that have been reported in full you will be using. That is your systematic review, a very detailed review of studies that have been published. So like I mentioned the word scoping search before. Before conducting a comprehensive literature search, a scoping search is done. What is a scoping search? A scoping search is just an overview. You're looking at a subject, cardiovascular diseases, or whatever someone wants to do it on, for example, cardiomyopathy, dilated cardiomyopathy. You're just going to go in, look at whatever has been published, whatever is there. That's a scoping search. You're taking an eagle's eye view of everything. You're looking at what has been published. And they're commonly, we normally use PubMed or Medline, just the general databases to see what's there. These are easily accessible databases. That is why we use these to provide more valuable information on the literature that has already been published. Defining the clinical question. So once we do a scoping review, that gives us a bit of a background idea of what's going on for that subject, of what the current, what research has already been done. You get an idea of what's going on, where the current research stands, what has been done in the past, sort of where the gap lies. You get that idea. Once you've done that, you come down to defining your clinical question. You narrow down your question. So when you start your search, you're inquisitive about a subject. You're like, oh, okay, maybe I want to do something about this. Then you start your search. You start getting an idea of the question because you start identifying gaps with the scoping search. And then you're like, okay, maybe this might be my question. After scoping review comes the point of defining it, narrowing it down, because the more you need to narrow down your question in order to really focus on the search that you would be doing. This is very important for your protocol as well. So narrow question will produce a narrow and precise search. To help frame that question, there are many frameworks. We use the PICO, which is very common, the PICO, some people, as they pronounce it. It's Population Intervention Comparator and Outcomes Framework. There are a lot of guidelines that have been published. This really helps in narrowing down your question, clinical question, for this, whatever project you're doing. Now I'm going to talk about the data sources. Now there are many, many data sources that we use that are available for systematic reviews and meta-analyses. How do we identify the right sources? Because they're like full search engines that you would be using. The one issue with all of these is that clinical trials might be reported in multiple journals and conference abstracts. So one study might be reported in 3 journals, and there might be 5 conference abstracts on it. You do not want to use that same study again and again and again that has been published in just different journals, for example, because what happens is, as researchers, when we are working on I'm talking about original research, when we're working on a trial and we publish papers on it, we don't just publish the results in one paper. We bring out many papers. We publish a lot of papers. For this one study, I remember we published like 6, 7 papers, and we're still publishing them, even though the study completed a couple of years ago, but we're still publishing. So you might see many papers published for one trial. So that is what we need to keep in mind when we're doing our search. I've put down the steps here for using data sources and systematic reviews and meta-analyses. These steps will help us, they will guide us and give you a better idea of what I'm trying to say here. The step 1 is that before you begin your review, you need to specify which resources you will use. And I will get back to this subject because I just expanded. I just said what the issue is, but I did not get into the sources. So I will get to the sources in just a bit. Step 2 is identify all the relevant reports. So once you have your sources, once you've decided, okay, these are the engines I'm going to use, step 2 is to identify the relevant reports and extract information from them. Because you will find thousands of papers, and then you're going to narrow down your search and bring it down to maybe 100, couple of hundreds, or bring it down further, 20, 30 papers, depends on what your subject is. Step 3 is to link individual trials with multiple sources. This is what I was talking about on the previous slide, that you make sure that you do not use the same results that have been published in 3 different journals. You only need one, one clinical trial, what the results were. You just need one paper. So make sure you link the trials with multiple sources. Step 4 is to use the PRISMA flowchart. Now, we spoke about PRISMA before as well. This is a 27-item checklist. I went over the steps before, but again, there's a published guideline. All the steps are listed there, super easy to follow. But yes, that is the guideline that we use for systematic reviews. This is just an overview of when you follow those 27 steps. This is the picture. This chart is what you get. And this chart is important because you have to include it in your study. The reason is that it basically gives you transparency. It shows the other person that what you did was reliable. We spoke about trust in our presentation before, that trust is also very important in systematic reviews because the other person needs to see the work that you've put in so that they know that you're not making up these results or these stories on your own. They need to see how you came down to that conclusion. So this basically is your way of being transparent with the search that you did. You mentioned all the records you identified, which like I mentioned, there were thousands of papers. And then you bring them down to the last step here. The last box is 37 studies. So from 2208, it came down to 37 after excluding based on your inclusion-exclusion criteria. I'll speak a bit more about that in just a bit. This is the protocol. I just mentioned I'll speak a bit more, and that's the next slide, the next bullet right here. Pre-specify your protocol and outcomes. This is very important. For this, you won't be the only person who's going to do this. Your research team is going to sit together. You need at least 2 people to extract the data, and another person, third person, to jump in if there's any, if any point is contested, then that person comes in to basically mediate the process. So you pre-specify your protocol and your outcomes for extracting information from the trials. You prepare a spreadsheet. Basically, it's just an Excel sheet that you prepare, which has all the outcomes listed there, whatever measures you want to extract from the studies. You follow the protocol for data extraction, and this step, you really have to be very thorough with this step, and you have to make sure that the units are aligned. You have to be very careful with this, because this is what your research is going to be based on. Identify what sources were included in the review. I mentioned transparency before. You have to mention what search engines you used, what your sources were, what steps you took. Mention everything word by word, line by line, what exactly you did to get your results. And then share the data sources and search strategy to reduce bias. This includes the mesh terms you used, whatever your steps were, just list them down. The more thorough you are, the better your paper is for the audience. Otherwise, you might end up getting questions from them in the comment section. They might end up or reaching out to you, emailing you with questions if you're not transparent. Or sometimes journals might even reject your paper if you're not as transparent with your strategy. Now, the research data, the term that we used in the subject of this presentation, that's a very broad term. Research data includes electronic health records that are commonly known as the electronic medical records, that is the purest form of electronic clinical data obtained from the point of care at medical facility, hospital, clinic, or practice. For those, I'm sure everyone here knows, but just to go over a quick recap, electronic health records is the online system that we use in clinics and hospitals. And whatever is happening, we document everything on that system every day, minute by minute, what's happening with the patient, what the vitals were, what treatment was given, what symptoms were seen. Everything is there in that. So that's why it says it's the purest type of electronic clinical data, because it tells you what happens day to day, minute by minute. Next is health surveys. These are conducted to provide prevalence estimates, mostly by government agencies, health agencies. Then there's administrative data, which is primarily hospital discharge data, health statistics, resource utilization, reported to a government agency. Again, sometimes we use that kind of data as well for example, I'm just thinking of some of the projects, in our hospital health improvement projects, you might use the admin data. Then there's patient disease registries. These are clinical information systems that track down a narrow range of key subjects. But these are on a very high level. For example, the National Program of Cancer Registry. These are big registries that we have access to as well. You can easily get access to them, and you will see studies on specific disease tracts there. And then there's the clinical trials data. We are going to talk about the clinical trials data. These resources in red are basically all the main registries that we use to get access the information on clinical trials data. Clinicaltrials.gov is very popular. It's a registry that basically is hosted by the NIH and has information on all the publicly and privately supported clinical studies from around the world. I personally use it for every systematic review, meta-analysis that I do. That and the Cochrane Library, both of these, I definitely use them both. You will find most of the studies over there. There are a few that might get through the cracks. And for that, then you have to look at the other registries to make sure you get all the studies. It's best to get them all in there. But yes, these two are commonly used, clinical trials and Cochrane Library. Then there's the WHO International Clinical Trials Registry Platform, the European Union Clinical Trials Database, the Center Watch. This slide here has some data sources that not everyone has access to. You can get access to them through, if you have, for example, agreements with the companies, only then can you get access to these. For example, the Yale Open Data Access or the NIMH Clinical Trials Limited Access Datasets. That's by the NIH, the Clinical Data Study Request. Everyone does not have access to them, but if you do through your companies or through your hospital, that would be amazing. Now, coming back to I was talking about Cochrane and clinical trials. Those are for the clinical trials specifically. Now, if I talk about, so for example, if I want to see systematic reviews, if I want to see meta-analyses, what has been published on that subject, what databases will I use? Medline and Embase. These are two of the most commonly used biomedical literature databases. These will not only have your clinical trials, they will also have all the reviews that have been published till date. And not just the reviews, they will also have the commentaries that have been published. So basically every piece of information that has been published would mostly be covered in them. Medline, for example, has more than 22 million references, Embase has 30 million references. And then you have, but the only thing with these two is that it's available only through either individual subscriber, you have to subscribe to the service, or through institutional access through universities or hospitals. PubMed provides access to a free version of Medline. It is slightly limited in terms of the literature, but it's free. And it's accessible to researchers, clinicians, and the public, which is amazing. So that is also very commonly used. These are a few more databases. They are very, as I mentioned here, subject and discipline specific, such as PsycInfo, that's about psychology, social health sciences. The Cochrane Central Register of Controlled Trials. This is only about clinical trials. Clinicaltrials.gov that I mentioned before, that only has clinical trials, ongoing clinical trials and trials that have happened in the past. So you might not find the results there essentially, but they would provide you links to the studies that have been done. And then using those links, you can find those studies in Medline, Embase, PubMed, if anything has been published on those studies. If not, if nothing has been published, then you can reach out to the authors. Their email addresses are provided on clinicaltrials.gov. You can reach out to them and ask them what the status is, what the studies are. And usually authors are, most of the time, they are really nice. I mean, the people that I approached, that I've reached out to in the past, they've been kind enough to shed some light or answer my questions. So definitely reach out to them if you ever have any questions about their studies. And then I mentioned some nursing articles, some nursing databases here. And then there's one, the Allied and Complementary Medicine, that's alternative treatments in medicine, if anyone is doing a search on that subject. Here, I basically just summarized all the links here. This was to make it easy for the audience here, if anyone wants to go over and see any of these databases, they can click on these links if you want these. I'm sure you can ask the admin, they can provide you. I can also copy these and send them as PDF, and then they can share these with you. There's a lot of links here and then here as well. These are all the sources that I spoke about and more. Like it has the GSK study register, that's the pharmaceutical company, the trials that they do. Then it has King's College London, Georgetown University Medical Center. So it has like a lot of good resources that you can use for your systematic reviews. And that is it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ma. I have a question, and then I'm sure we have some more questions in the chat box. But before then, I just wanted to know about up-to-date. So many of us, we have up-to-date subscription, and even as you get into residency or at your workplace, you have the subscription somehow. So what is the advantage, or what's the use? How can this be useful for to pull out data for your research article? Thank you.
Up-to-date is an amazing resource as clinicians as well. As you start your residency, you will see that many times you have all the information, you know the information, but just to go the extra mile to make sure that your treatment, because treatment guidelines change every now and then, right? Just to make sure that you were on track with, or you have the most up-to-date information, it's always good to go to that resource and just quickly navigate it to see, okay, what's going on? Just quickly read up on that. That will not just give you a refresher, but it will also ensure what you're doing is most up-to-date. So that way you can stand with confidence if anyone ever comes and contests that what you did was not right, or this was outdated, you can always tell them that, no, look, this is what up-to-date says. This is the most updated information that is there, the treatment, whatever you're doing, like, if it's about the disease or if it's about the treatment, these are the most updated guidelines. I personally am a big fan of UpToDate. I love using it. And for your research as well, UpToDate mentions, if you go and read an article on UpToDate, you will see at least 10 different references at the end of that. So what they do is they also do a very comprehensive search. You can use all of that information in your systematic review, meta-analysis, whatever you're doing. And then not just that, you can also go to the references that they've mentioned and read, because those articles are linked there. So if you need to dig in deeper, you can go to each of those 10 different references. You can click on those, read those articles, and see what those articles are talking about. So that would give you even more information if someone really needs to dig in deeper, so that no one can question me, because I know everything. I read everything that was within my reach. I mean, I shouldn't say I read everything, but everything that was within my reach. So yeah, UpToDate is an amazing tool.
Thank you so much. Brilliant answer indeed. So I would say it's like a shortcut.
Yeah,
Right.
yes. When you're standing in clinic, yes. For research, unfortunately, no. For research, you still have to do 2,200 articles. You still have to skim through them.
Okay. So we have more questions here. So the first one is, what's the difference between this between the scoping review and the literature review?
So scoping review, like I said, it's a very general. I gave an example of dilated cardiomyopathy when I was talking about it. So what I can do is, for scoping review, I will just go on Google and I will start typing in dilated cardiomyopathy just to see what's going on. And within 2 hours, or even sometimes even just if you don't have much time, even half an hour, you just read all the articles that have been published. Not just articles, but all the information that is there. Like I said, I mentioned Google here. So like everything that comes in front of you, just to give you an idea of what's going on. It's just going to do that. No details over there, nothing. But then if you get into proper literature review is something that you can even document. You can write it up as well, that this is what I found, and then you can even publish it and mention that this is a literature review. So yeah, that goes into a bit more detail. Scoping review is just an overview, an eagle's eye, a bird's view of what's going on. So yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, that's right. So the next one is, can you explain further on the MESH data collection and how to transfer what we found there to our data sheet? Yeah.
Yes, these mesh terms are very important. First, let's start with what mesh terms are. These are your search terms that you use in your research. And the reason why they're so important is because sometimes when we are looking up articles, let's talk about dilated cardiomyopathy again. I'm coming back to that. And for example, if I'm looking into Chagas disease, and that causes dilated cardiomyopathy from Chagas disease. Now, dilated cardiomyopathy has a lot of reasons. There's a lot of different causes. But if I'm specifically looking at Chagas disease, one quick way to minimize, go from those 2,200 articles to 1,100 articles or 1,000 articles is just to focus on, use the search term, put in Chagas disease. That will literally cut down on your number of articles, because you have dilated cardiomyopathy, but now I'm asking about the cause. So I'm just looking at Chagas disease and the dilated cardiomyopathy caused by that. So that would literally bring it down. That would narrow down your search a lot. This is where the mesh data comes. The search terms that I would use between that would be dilated cardiomyopathy, Chagas disease, and then you can add in some more search terms. Don't worry about this too much. There are mesh term generators that are available now. They are super helpful. If you just Google it, you will be able to find a couple of free mesh term generators. What they can do is they can help come up with more mesh terms. So you can just put in some of the terms, search terms that are coming to your mind. Let's say 2, 3, we all can come up with 2, 3 search terms for our research projects. And then they will give you a whole list. They will give you like 20, 30 mesh terms, and you can just select 3 to 4. You don't need too many. I would say a minimum of 5 to like a max of 9, 10, depending on what your subject is. Just pick up the most common precise mesh terms that would lead someone like me, if I'm trying to find your article, if I put in those search terms, I should be able to get to your article. That's the purpose of these mesh terms, search terms.
Yeah, thanks again. So I would say it's something like collecting related articles, right? It helps to collect related articles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks. One more, I think. Please send in your questions and your comments. Dr. Maha is still here. So we have one more. It says, what is the difference between meta-analysis and systematic review?
Mm-hmm. So systematic review is just based on the literature that you find. There is no analysis involved here. Meta-analysis, on the other hand, is where you extract the quantitative data in addition to the qualitative data, and then you analyze that data. You use different softwares to analyze the data, you come up with graphs, and then you present your results. So it's basically extremely thorough, more thorough than systematic reviews, just literature. Meta-analysis where you do, in addition to the literature, you do all the analysis. So yeah.
Thank you. So we have a video on meta-analysis on YouTube. So yeah, you can go and watch that. I think we have more questions. So what are you guys saying? Do you have more questions for Dr. Maha? Please, you can unmute your mic and say something. Or chat, send a chat. All right, I believe that's it. Thank you so much, Dr. Maha. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We're happy